good. This is Team Circus Voices, Bristol, Circus City 2017.
Circus Voices is an ongoing critical development programme to raise the level of critical discourse around circus arts. And a group of 10 diverse circus artists have come together. The first show we discuss as a group is Yablochkov Candle.
The first question that we have in our pile is, what is Yablockov's Candle and how is it represented in the show?
I looked up on Wikipedia as the show was starting, because I thought it might be like a Schrodinger's cat kind of conceptual thing, almost like a scientific term. It's not. It's just a kind of light bulb. So Yablochkov's Candle is like an arc lamp. So it's a very old kind of early light bulb that.
Oh, it's a real object.
Yeah.
It's a real object. It is not dissimilar from the large bulbs that are there. It's a kind of lamp that was used in theaters because I think it's a very warm light, and it's it says, on application of electric supply, the fuse wire blows and strikes the arc, then continues to burn, gradually consuming the carbon electrodes as it does so. So the thing about these lamps is they light up, but then they only last about 2 hours, and you can't relight them once they're lit. So they were used in theaters for lighting.
Can you turn them off once they're lit? Or do they go until the end?
Okay. You can turn them off, but once they're off, you can't relight them. It then goes on to say they came up with a way to be able to relight them. You sort of repowder the fuses and get it to relight. But I think that's very relevant that it's not relightable and it's very ephemeral.
And you had this knowledge as you were watching the show.
Yes.
Did you draw connections?
Yeah, I thought that the lighting sort of became the whole show for me after that, because the whole show had this sort of like warmth that was all driven by the lights, I thought. Then the lights were really present all the way through. The first thing you see is this big lighting structure, so that becomes really essential geology.
I thought that Yablochkov was somebody who died and they lit a candle for him, so that was just my own in my head.
There was there was something in the lyrics that made me think about death a lot, and I don't pay attention to audio things very well. Like in terms of music, I don't really listen to music. I don't go to concerts. So when there's nothing visually changing, my focus is on the words. And there was quite a lot of like this melancholy stuff about death that was hitting me.
I kind of assumed that it was a reference to like, I don't know, some kind of inspired love, like a candle being blown out or something, or like wishing on a candle that someone was returned. That was my impression from like the lyrics and the tone and everything. But having heard what the title actually means, it makes a lot more sense. I mean, in terms of the lighting and the focus on the lighting, I just assumed that it was I assumed that it was there because it was something interesting to focus on. Now the fact that the whole title is about a bulb candle, I felt that the show focused on lighting a lot more than anything else that I've seen. And it used the lighting in a very interesting way as well. I feel that understanding that it's actually about the bulb, that explains why it's such a key aspect.
Isn't any of us, now I know what this candle thing is, I was none the wiser from the show, but I was looking at the light bulbs, specifically the ones on the ropes, and just actually wondering practically how they'd done it. And also the people I was sitting with, sorry, I went and sat at the front. We were all wondering about the light bulbs, so without knowing, I don't think any of us knew what the Yablochkov Candle was.
No. And when Eric first looked it up before the show started, I think it was like an Edison bulb, but one that hasn't regained popularity, so it's one that people haven't heard of. And that kind of made me think about the really formal nature of this presentation, of focusing on the like the physical discipline and the skills of that performer, and it's like such a clear, pointed focus of this is what you are looking at now, or now you are listening to this singer and her skills, and that isn't something I see very much in the current moment. So I was making these connections about it being a historical homage or something to styles that haven't really made it into today. That might also be because we were talking about recreations and reenactments quite a lot in the Circus Futures
This is
conference.
even though they overlap, you felt like even though they were together overlapping, you felt like it was still very focused.
Yeah. Which might be because I don't focus very easily on sound, so as soon as there was something to watch, I was watching. But then I felt that they balanced that out by leaving the aerials out of a large proportion of the show.
Yeah, I'd say that these electric candles, they were clearly defining where we should be paying attention to. There was a moment when the whole audience turned their heads because a candle lit up over here. So I feel like it was a show about these light bulbs, and they were essential. They were part of the crew, just like the performers themselves.
Yeah. Does the circus serve the work?
I would say that there is a stark difference in the quality of movement when the performer was interacting with the non-apparatus, like non-traditional apparatus portions, and that for me resonated far more so than when it was simply on a circus apparatus, because I was able to think more about a body interacting with the space rather than a performer exhibiting skills. Like, it was much more evocative to see her simply sitting and navigating on the large bulbs. There was a little bit in there with the rope and interacting with the column, but I felt like that's something that is very difficult to recreate in different spaces. But for me, whenever it was like just a rope, I was like, so.
Okay. Anybody else?
When you think about that question, you have to think about what was to serve the work, what was the work. And I feel like for me the work was an atmosphere, and therefore the aerials, like, I feel like the atmosphere is this warm cabaret kind of atmosphere, although I feel like for me it's a bit confusing, because when I think about cabaret, I think about a relaxed sense of people all coming to see something, but also to have their own interactions, to have a social thing. This is not what this is. And so for me there was like a real vacuum all here that didn't have that bustling, didn't have waiters, didn't have people in and out, didn't have that feel. And in this, I have the same problem with the aerial. I feel like there was only one performer, and she did an amazing job being all over the place and interacting with all the different things, but to create an atmosphere of that cabaret atmosphere that I feel like that thick kind of, I don't know, it just to be on your own is quite tricky to have that one. So I think in a way it did, but I think in a way it also could have didn't support it as much as her voice. And she was more the performer of the music. She was more, I feel like she served the work in the sense of a character, like she had a feel about her, which I think really resonated with all of this stuff. And I didn't necessarily have that with the circus. I felt like when you took her away, it didn't really change the atmosphere. Like, as a sculptor, she was kind of sculptural, but the rest of the sculpture, I feel like, did more to.
I got a bit confused with the cabaret setting as well. So it's laid out cabaret style, but it's not. It didn't feel like a cabaret space, and they, as well as like the way the audience behaved, there was no exchange of gaze, and there was no attempt to communicate like a shared space between the performers and us. I didn't get any sense of that.
Yeah, I didn't either.
Her status as well, because everything in the setting and in the approach to the show really says cabaret, except for their actual demeanors, where they came in like a conductor. We were asked to applaud for them, and because everyone's so focused on her, I find she really gets this. I can't put into words what she did to pull our attention so completely. But there was nothing really telling us that we couldn't be chatting amongst ourselves and moving tables and ordering drinks in the corner and whatnot. That was the setting they made, and yet at the same time, we couldn't take our eyes off her. And I think that was really interesting that she had that sort of power over us from the start. She was all we could look at.
Yeah, I wonder if anything about that is to do with the people who have come to see the show, particularly knowing that this was the show recommended to people who had booked for Becquerel Effect in the Old Vic Theatre, which was then cancelled, and then so if they're coming here from when they had previously booked a very traditional theatre venue, if that makes a difference. But
there were people in and out, though, which there aren't normally in the same way, I don't think, when the seats are set up in... People did go and get drinks, but it was a very...
I think the subtlety of the lighting, not subtlety, but the dim lighting and the two instruments, two people making noise, and then the aerialist also made noise at times. But I think that added a lot to how quiet everybody became. Because for me, I agree with you that I feel like the work was in creating an atmosphere, and that atmosphere to me was one of like intimacy and quietness, and that kind of trying to make it feel like a much smaller space, like going to just see a singer, where it is quiet because you're here to just listen and observe, I guess. So I think the subtlety of everything made you zone, for me it made me zone in, I think, a lot more as well. And I guess, in the beginning the lights were on right above them as well. So it's like, ding, here we are.
can you identify influences from other shows or art forms or artists?
There's definitely a trend in contemporary dance with the spasming that I see a lot of, and it was only at the very end, but I mean, it's definitely something that is going around or has been going around.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I call it twitching. But yeah, there's largely, I think, because of particular practitioners who, Alcide, who went and trained with Black Sky White, a Russian, very extreme, hardcore physical theatre company, and there's a lot of that kind of like jerky movement, far more jerky than she did, obviously in a different context. And I can see that spreading.
I guess the cabaret and the variety is kind of the idea of the cabaret is an influence. Although I feel like it's much more of an aesthetic influence than the sort of underlying the variety or any of all of the stuff that comes with cabaret wasn't there. So it was more this very specific visual thing.
And I think I'm going to put it on me. I don't know if that'll work. But there was an aesthetic of a really formal a concert, like the orchestra, the pianist, like this kind of dress shirt and the sparkly black. That, yeah, and what you said about the first entrance and conjuring that mood from the word go, that struck me.
Well, the show for me reminded me a lot of Smoke and Mirrors in terms of the colouring and everything. Very black, white, and cream. Aesthetically, if I didn't know that this was a different show, photos and everything, I think would look very, very similar.
And Hannah Moisler of Lumo Company's Wiredo, I don't know if anybody else saw that, but that, I think wrote it in my notes, that it's this kind of, the light is the same tone as the skin, and then it's the black, and that's your entire colour palette. And she's Finnish as well, so I don't know if that's a Finnish trend.
There's also Bianco su Bianco with Francisco. It's very much the light bulbs and the two cabaret performers and live music. Yeah, it's that stark romantic vibe.
Were there clear, strong characters?
I was really confused with the aerial artist. Like, sometimes I felt like she was acting, but then I was like, no, that's just like a neutral performance phase. But then like those kind of like the shaking in the end, or she kind of played that she didn't manage quite on the hoop, or like sometimes she seemed to struggle, but it wasn't really a character. I think it was more like, yeah, like the only thing I kind of recognized was the theme of struggling, but I didn't really see a character, I think.
Anybody care to disagree?
She was quite playful. There was times when she was quite playful, but in a very, often she was looking down, and often she was very in her own kind of world. I didn't feel like the singer was she would occasionally kind of smile to herself, and she had quite a connection with, I felt like I had quite a connection with where she was. But I felt like the aerialist was much more trying to be at times sculptural, at times just like physical and just a body. But then there was times when she was like playing with like things, like having her own little world. So it was kind of this.
I think maybe that ties nicely to the question about how much of a self-awareness of performing the performance was there, which was your question, Andrea.
I don't know the answer. I think she was at times in and out of character. And yes, I agree that the singer was more of a presence, and the act came second.
And
it was complementary of the music and not vice versa, which is fine. But I just.
And the man who played the cello on a double bass, and at one point the keys, he was like not a presence for me at all, even when he joined in the singing, which was really interesting.
His name isn't even on the programme.
Isn't
there
it?
are two women's names are on there. He's not even on there.
Wow.
I feel like that with the aerialist as well as the cellist, is that they were almost sunken back, not there, which sounds awful, but not that they weren't there, but they almost, when she just sunk away and it was like, oh, don't see me, I just did my bit and I'm gone now. Because even the bits between felt a bit awkward for me, like when they were doing rigging, and it felt separate to it, and that sits uncomfortably with me for some reason. But then the singer was so good and so like drawing you in, like you said, that it kind of eased that away. So it was really interesting.
Thomas, I know you focus a lot on sound.
I keep on wanting to jump in, but maybe I should wait until it's our question, the sound question. But maybe it's because we are used to watching circus. We are expecting to see more circus here. But to me, it was more of a concert with occasional circus coming in and out. And I was painfully aware of how whenever there's a high energy song, it's just the singer. And whenever the energy goes down again, the circus artist joins in. And fair enough, she has to do 7 acts. She's going to take her time. But it all went this way. Like it didn't really go anywhere else. You pointed out that yes, in the few rare moments when she wasn't doing an act, she wasn't using circus equipment, that stood out to us. But when she was on the hoop, she did 2 songs or 3 songs, I don't even remember, because all just blended into that autopilot sequence that she always does. She wasn't listening to the music wasn't responding to her. If you could have one or the other and you wouldn't even notice. So, to answer a completely different question, they were not really considering one another, and I think that's a wasted opportunity.
Especially with live musicians who can interact.
I disagree. I think there were some there were some moments where she had quite good musicality and was working with music quite a bit. I feel like there was some illustrative kind of, but that was all. I feel like she was illustrating the sound at some point.
It was all very soft. Yeah. She did nothing dynamic in 7 acts. Yeah. Like everything was very smooth. there were, like, all the music was pretty similar on its guitar and bass, so it's going to be bass. And so was her movement. So I thought there were sort of recurring things that she did through the different apparatuses as well, especially in her legs. That there's sort of the way she changed. Yeah, it's just she does the sort of change of position that leads from the knee that she managed to just lift in pretty much everything. But it's a really sort of soft, sort of almost creeping way of moving, where you tread very lightly, because it doesn't slam and it doesn't, it doesn't use any. It doesn't really use strength, but it also doesn't use a dynamism to move as well. I thought the music also did that. Yeah, but almost the way that people were trying to move in and out of the room, and that very kind of
delicate.
Almost don't notice me.
I don't know if I wanted her to be here throughout or something, like for her to be, creeping around all the time, like from something to another.
Because once you put her out, you can't put her back on again. But they did.
But that's the thing.
Yeah, but they obviously wanted to, because they did it so many times.
Yeah. And there was time I didn't like. It made me really aware of that feeling of when somebody does a performance and you really want the moment to acknowledge them, and then they take that away from you. There's something a bit odd about that slinking off and not being.
I think if you need, you can sometimes slink off, but you need. This might sound contradictory, but you need to do it with conviction. Even if you are doing it sneak. Yes, because she was kind of like, oh, don't look at me. It's kind of like you could do that somehow in a more present way. Even, do you know what I mean? It was how she went off, not the fact that she went off. I think was a bit weird, because I think from a practical purpose she obviously needed to, because she needed to be in different places. But it was just kind of like she was in a rehearsal and just wandering off. There was no intent.
She wasn't allowed. She didn't have. She didn't have a voice maybe to communicate with us about leaving. There was no.
But I think
she's
that's
not
what I
aware
mean by
of,
intent.
she's not aware of who she is. Then how does she know how to say I'm going over there now with her body? But
maybe I don't know. But she could have improved her exits, and then it wouldn't have been so bitty.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So it's just hard with one performer. Just think with one performer for all of that. It's quite like, oh, you'll come back. Oh, okay.
I think it's the going, coming back for me. And obviously, that definitely has to do with the entrances and exits. I feel like there are definitely, moments where she could have kind of just sat at a table and watched the singer, and again drawn our attention to the singer, but without leaving the space necessarily. And if she has to move to a different space, kind of, I feel like it could have been less disjointed if they could have made something out of those moments. I think, it's almost like they missed an opportunity to create something out of that issue that she needs to go somewhere.
And the costume change is really, I can't make sense of that.
I didn't get that either.
I can't wrap my head around it. That if she's a constant force, and it's very apparent that she's a single performer, why does she need to change who she is?
Yeah.
Not drastic costume changes either, and and not technical ones either.
Yeah.
Like, she didn't put on something that was more appropriate for rope. She put on something that was less appropriate for rope. And so I really want to know why
I thought
she
she
changed.
a sequence on the rope, scratching
I get that, but then she got a thing that was really thin and can really easily get caught up in a propeller, which she then did, and she did I
think that helped to just kind of disjoint it again. And again, that's something I think she could have done that on stage. It's just a top, she had something on underneath. There's no reason she couldn't have just made a little bit out of it. And
I feel like that would have lowered her status. I feel like if she were to undress, it's all so very formal. To have the backstage on stage, I think
she had a little bit of rigging on stage, but did it also in the dark in a slightly apologetic kind of way. And it was obvious that she was doing it. but it wasn't like. But I just mean to have that the whole backstage, onstage thing, like that wasn't like they could have had somebody working doing that for her, but she did it, but not in any kind of character or in any kind of.
Not with any pretty lights on it.
It's a little bit playful, I found, when she was like shaking the thing in the beginning. I found like there's a little bit of, maybe, I don't know if it's character, but definitely something. It wasn't kind of just like, and all I'm doing is the rigging. There was a little bit of something.
The movement of the lights, I think, went better with the music than maybe the movement of the bodies did.
I felt like in the second kind of half of the show, like when she got on the rope, I felt like there was more interaction of the body and the music, more like fusion or something, more interaction between music and movement. But in the I didn't find it at the beginning much at all.
So we've got like the kind of personal response questions. Does the circus resonate emotionally, and did you experience any strong physical sensations? So, anyone?
Absolutely no emotional resonance whatsoever at any time. And I was trying to think why not, because I mean, obviously the songs had quite emotional content, and having read that, it definitely, and I think it's at least partly something to do with like what you were saying about the music. Random music, random movement sequences, you could have put anything with anything. There was no apparent reason or connection. And music is a very emotive art form, and I'm not a music person. And there was no rationale, which means there was no emotional connection for me. So it is something to do with how they put it together, I think.
I don't know whether you saw Wild Boar in Edinburgh.
No, I didn't.
So one of their things was critics saying for no apparent reason, and I think it's fine for critics to say that, actually, because if everything is done with a reason, and see if I can. Okay, so artists make decisions and they put things in for reasons. But if that is not apparent to their audience, which is presumably why they are putting the work on in the first place, then there is something amiss. And is that just made me think of what you were saying there. It's like they probably did choose why they were putting those music and those acts, but it wasn't communicating to us.
It was, to me, it didn't work in any way. To the extent that I had no emotional connection with it, there was no resonance, and if you start analysing a show when you're watching it, something is going wrong because you're not watching it. And I tried not to do this, but I was. So I was trying to work out what was going wrong.
Yeah, it's like when you mix colours, right? If you put blue and red together, you make purple, but this was just blue and red. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, but random blue and red at that.
Was there anybody who did experience emotional connections or physical responses?
I did when the bassist played a sort of like a tiny bit of, which is really bad to admit, because then it's not the light, it's not the performance, and it's not the singing. It was just the poor guy that nobody paid attention to, and he had his 30 seconds, and then I was like, oh, this is amazing. So yeah.
I had the same with the music at one point. I was like, I felt like I was feeling a bit like it was a bit dark, and I was feeling a bit drained, and it was a bit and then when there was Ariel and whatever, and I think the disconnection was kind of tiring in a way for me to, and I actually just closed my eyes and listened to her, and I thought, actually, this is really beautiful, she's really beautiful, the music is really beautiful, and it did make me feel like they're trying to create this atmosphere for this music, but actually this music creates quite a beautiful atmosphere on its own. And if this music was playing in an actual bar or an actual cabaret setting, I think it would be really beautiful, and people would really love it. And I don't know if this is the right placement for this work, was what I felt.
That's exactly what I was thinking the whole show. Was like, is that piece of work created to play in like a theatre, or is it actually for a place where it's like where you can order food, where you can order drinks, and where it's like, oh, this is it's a nice evening, I enjoy this music. Oh, there's a nice aerial performer.
Yeah,
like,
because you didn't put that much effort in the performance,
Yeah.
so you kind of watch a little bit and then eat a little bit and then
I mean, I do like the challenge of taking on a very simply romantic object like the light bulb and trying to work within that, because immediately that's like so slick, so stark, and very evocative. Do I think that anything new is said in it? Not particularly, but I commend sort of like taking on what could be considered a trope and trying to expand on it.
Were you going to say something, Miranda? I heard a little
I
voice.
think it's already been said. I think I was going to say that I enjoyed it a lot more when I was just listening to the music and almost not when that's awful, when the aerialist wasn't on stage, because then I could just be like, oh, I'm enjoying the music, and she was an amazing singer and really captured the attention. So there's something about what you're saying about the disjointed bits that meant I didn't enjoy the music as much. And I don't know whether that's my technical brain looking at all the techniques she was doing on the aerial equipment. I'm aware that I'm doing that a lot.
I found that I really liked the scene where she was playing on the lights. That was really interesting, and that was quite enjoyable. And I can remember that scene, and I can remember when she was on the rope when both ends were connected up. The other aerial acts I can't really remember, which is very weird because normally I will pay attention to the aerial. I can remember the music, but I remember she came down on the rope.
It kind of struck me that they were dance solos on aerial equipment, which I'm not sure if that's the same as aerial dance, because aerial dance normally means quite a specific type of performance in the air. But
aerial sculpture is a thing.
Yeah, is it?
Well, has been. People have said it's a thing. Yeah, there are people who are artists who work with aerial and thing, and that's kind of what I kept thinking with this a little bit. But also I kept thinking about perfume adverts. I don't know if anybody else saw that,
so
but like
true,
that kind of like chic, kind of clear Chanel-y kind of
take bits of it and make
thing.
it.
If you just took a picture of it, it would
That's
be
brilliant.
a perfume advert, like that kind of. Yeah.
It's funny because I actually really enjoyed the aerial. And I don't know that aerial dance necessarily always has to have a meaning. Like I think, or like a purpose or intention or story. I think like with a lot of dance you are looking at movement for movement's sake sometimes, and aesthetic quality and the shapes that we make and all that kind of stuff. And I found her aerial interesting from a choreographic perspective. There wasn't a lot of drops, or like you said, there wasn't a lot of dynamic stuff, but it was, for me, I found it really interesting to watch. I liked her as a performer. However,
There were drops, and when she did drop, it really stood out.
right, but there weren't a lot, so it
No,
wasn't
exactly.
like very
It was
drop
interesting
heavy or,
the
yeah.
times when she decided to.
I mean,
She did come at you a couple of times.
I enjoyed watching her, but in terms of motion, I felt more motion with the music. That's what I mean. That's what I.
No, I'm not saying nobody enjoyed watching her at all, but I think it's interesting because I really enjoyed it. But yes, no emotional response, only a choreographic visual.
And when I said that aerial dance normally has a specific meaning, what I meant was aerial dance is usually used as a term to relate to a specific form. So aerial dance, as I understand it, is usually when something's on harnesses, that kind of, like, I've not heard the term used to describe the sort of stuff that Ilona was doing in this show, which is
different to my interpretation of the genre aerial
Okay.
dance. Yeah, but I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Are you thinking kind of aerial dance like Gravity and Levity?
The companies who plug themselves as aerial
like
dance,
all vertical dance and wall dance and
So I've just come from performing for a season with an aerial dance company where, there was one harness act, or two harness acts in a full-length production, but everything else was trapeze, rope, and choreography and some like hand loop stuff. It wasn't all, definitely, they don't see themselves as just harness or, so that's an interesting...
Where is that? 'Cause
in Portland, Oregon. It's an interesting difference in perspective of how people to find themselves.
Yeah, and terminology that changes depending where you are in the world for a global form that's not, yes.
It's really interesting that in the programme, she's on the hoop twice.
Well, that's a singer, isn't it?
That's a singer.
Is she on the hoop? Oh, is that her on the hoop? Okay, but that doesn't happen in the show.
Okay, so the programme then,
Oh, yeah,
the
we're
question
on
was,
that.
is the show what it says it is, and to what extent?
The other thing is it also says it's a night. A cabaret-esque
Exactly,
night.
it's 85 minutes and we've seen 45, 50, so we've seen half of what they promised.
This is 85 minutes?
That's what it says on here.
Wow, I didn't see that.
Does that include when people were sat at the tables at the beginning? and they were
Usually
playing
it
music?
shouldn't.
I think what often happens, I don't know here, but I know that like what often happens back home is these have to be printed so far in advance, and if you're still creating the work, you're like, okay, it's probably going to be roughly this amount of time, and we take the photos, and we have to give a photo for press, and this is the aesthetic that we're going for, but you don't necessarily end up with a show that is what you set out to create. So.
Was it not 85 minutes? How long was it?
I don't think so. I think
It was less than an hour.
Yeah,
Was it?
And it started
I
after
didn't feel that.
Yeah.
Right.
so we didn't enter until after
No,
7.
that's true.
Yeah, it finished at like 8, so it was a lot shorter. I don't know if they were planning on like including the time at the start. I think was it Chameleon? It said the show was longer than it actually was because they include like an interval for you to get food and drink and everything.
That kind
that's,
of
I think that's the kind
cabaret
of atmosphere they were trying to create, but didn't quite.
It's interesting, like, it does say cabaret, like, when I read it, I remember seeing the beginning that, it says cabaret a lot, but to me it felt more like a lounge, lounge singer, where everybody's gone to just be quiet and relax and listen and smoke long cigarettes, without the hedonistic kind of feel.
But the only thing that conveyed that was the singer, and she didn't go for it. She just kind of referenced it very delicately. The rest of the things weren't in any way giving me that impression. Yeah.
I felt like the lighting
Yeah,
and
the
the
lighting.
intimacy all felt very loungy to me, and the dim.
I think there's something about having this show advertised as cabaret, but in this particular programme, which is my, I suppose, my preconceptions about a circus festival in the UK and what will be in that circus festival in the UK in this day and age. I expected them to go somewhere beyond what cabarets usually just like seem to be, but they were quite strictly, this is what they're presenting.
But it wasn't really cabaret. In the sense of variety, it wasn't really cabaret.
I think more maybe from a practical standpoint of the fact that this artist has had success in the past, and Finland is known for really supporting their artists and giving grant money to artists and festivals and things. So it might be strategic in terms of, I don't know, this is like, I feel like I don't want to be saying this on camera, but like it could be a strategic partnership. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it might.
Do we have to leave?
Partnership with the musicians, or
No, just the fact that this particular show is being programmed in this festival at this point in time. Like, perhaps this show fit into the space.
Yeah.
Like, they needed a show that fit into the space with a certain number of performers because there's a certain budget. And
Because it does talk
a
about
government
being...
is being funded. Like, the government is funding it. Like,
Yeah, because
there could be that. Like, it's not an ideal world.
the
like,
same
we operate on
strategicness
a
when
budget.
you look at the programme, it is probably the only sort of late night feeling kind of thing. And I could imagine that in a programme like this you want one thing that seems like it's a bit of a sort of not nightclubby but a bit like evening time thing.
No. I just wanted to, we were talking about programming and how this
sorry.
was possibly a strategic choice for the festival to label them this way.
They're like one of 6 funders.
Yeah, and then if you consider that Beckrell show cancelled and they've recommended people come and see this, actually Beckrell show is entirely different. And if I were to book Beckrell show expecting the chaos and the physicality they provide, coming here, I would be disappointed maybe.
Yeah.
But I understand why the festival wants to fill the seats. So.
I wondered about that too, how I would feel if I, was coming to see, if I'd read this and I felt like, okay, I'm going to see a circus show and it has music and it's this cabaret, how I would feel about what was presented as opposed to what I was expecting.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that I enjoyed it definitely, but I'm not sure it would have I might have felt slightly misled, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I think that it was a fantastic concert in terms of the music. It was really fantastic. The aerial was watchable, that what I can remember, but not life-changing to see. The aesthetics were really impressive, I thought, but I think it's a stretch to call it a cabaret. I think it's a definite stretch to call it a cabaret.
I feel like it's a stretch to call it a theatre show of any. I don't think it's.
I put that it was a concert decorated with some nice. What did I put? Like aerial dance. Oh no, aerial choreography between human bodies and lighting equipment, something like that.
What's the word for it when you do like tableaus and like animate a space? There's a special word for minuets or vignettes.
Vignettes.
Yeah. Was it sort of a bit like that, like little moments, but not quite? That the problem when you want to have little moments is that in this kind of setting, as soon as there's something, everybody looks at it, and it happens a lot with music events where they have aerial as well with the music, and the aerial artists are told, oh, it's just hang about, don't worry, you should be there, it's just atmosphere, and then as soon as you're there, it's like everybody's watching you for the act that you haven't got, kind of thing. But she did have acts. They were.
I find it interesting, like you've commented twice on how you don't remember the aerial. And for me, like just personally, I often find that pieces of aerial that I really love, I can't remember what happened. Like for me, it means to me when I feel that way that the choreography has flowed together in a way that I enjoyed what I was watching, and then I don't know what I saw. It's like kind of almost mystifying in a way. And I think you get that a lot less, obviously, in traditional circus, because you have the wait for the applause and ta-da in between the tricks, and you have the big tricks and then the pause afterwards. And I don't know, I think it's just interesting hearing you comment on that in a different way, and the idea of not remembering something. For me, it's usually a good thing, but not for everyone necessarily.
I mean, I suppose thinking about the aerial performances I don't remember every single move that they go through, but I remember moments of it. I remember how it made me feel at the time. And I just don't have that with the hoop act and when she was just on the rope and when she came down. I can remember the lighting when she came down.
Yeah, there were some really cool things, but like when she was on the hoop, and because of the haze, like there were these shafts of shadow going up when you normally see shafts of light, and that was really cool. And from sitting right underneath when she was coming down the column, the way that I think somebody said it right at the beginning, that the light was another character and it was another.
See, but this is it. This is one. The circus performer skills were used to its full potential. When she was there just to decorate the music, as you mentioned, and that's something, if I were to be described as, after doing an act, I would be really disappointed, but I understand that's what she was. She was a decoration when she was doing her hoop act. And then opera makers, when they need a distraction, they hire circus people and they call them human fireworks. And they ask them to do a backflip here and a handspring here, because that is how they think of us. And I think making work in the future might make me not want to be seen as decoration. I want to be thinking of filler material, or accept gigs where we are just asked to just hang there for a bit, because then you realize, actually, no, this is a responsibility. You need to prepare for this. You need to. You have this platform, use it. Don't just be a decoration.
And then just to kind of put an example in there, when the Gandinis worked on Akhenaten, Philip Glass opera, last year or year before, they were fully integrated, and what they were doing was not decoration in the same way. And I think that's a step in the right direction, which is cool. But there is, there's still an audience for things looking pretty. Maybe we're not that audience, but...
Another thing you said earlier, when we were back at the hub, was saying about, what were you saying about, sometimes shows are just like a picture, make an image, and so maybe this is one of those. It's like, it's made a really lovely image.
Yeah.
Maybe
we didn't...
I think it could be a Christmas performance or something. I mean, this as well. This is misleading.
That's a huge achievement that she managed to do all of this stuff with lights without going Christmas, though. Because this is very Christmas. She's made a pyramid of stringed lights. And I hadn't thought of the word Christmas until you said that. Which is a huge achievement.
Yeah, and especially considering we've got the Christmas lights and all the rest of the stuff outside.
But then when you talk about strategic creation of work, this is a very sellable product in certain markets, I guess.
On paper,
but maybe not like it's on this paper, but in terms of we'll do a sophisticated Christmas concert while you drink your Christmas drinks in your bank do.
Yeah. It's very, we're talking about high art in Circus Futures today. This is much more in your upper echelons of high arts, I think, that they're going for here.
Sorry guys, it's 9 o'clock now, so we're closing up the building in front of them.